I'm here at Alan Howarth's project studio to talk to one of the early pioneers of sound design. This is gonna rock. So tell me about how you got started in the business.
Through the oddest of circumstances, another Cleveland friend, a fellow named Pax Lemon, a big burly biker character, is working at Paramount just making copies of tapes. He's doing transfers. And two guys are standing behind him, and they have a conversation about how they wish they had somebody who knew about synthesizers to help make sound effects for this movie. And Pax goes around and goes, "Oh man, you got to talk to my buddy Alan. He works for Weather Report." Like, you know, that's going to be a big deal. And they go, "Weather Report, is that the one at 11 o'clock or 9 o'clock? But nonetheless, they gave my name, and I went down and met with them, and they said, "All right, so we're making a movie, it's called Star Trek, the Motion Picture. And could you make us an audition tape?" So I went back to my dining room, and I said, well, I said, "What do you want?" And he says, "Well, make us the sound of the Starship Enterprise going warp 1 to warp 7. That's your test." So I went back and up into a little Prophet 5 synthesizer, and I dialed up with the Polymod this effect that was just constantly cascading. Because, you know, that's a lot of distance to cover for this acceleration. Turned in the tape, and that tape became the sound of the Enterprise.
So you've done a lot. You've been there, done that, got the T-shirt.
30 years of this stuff,
yeah.
man. Just in the post world of movies and TV and stuff like that. And prior to that, another 15 years of the band business and making records and stuff like that. So I've really, from my viewpoint, seen it all go from literally mono to stereo to surround to this whole thing. I've participated with manufacturers. I've created content. And now the video games is a huge arena of opportunity because there's money there. Video games are doing very well. I mean, as an example, the Avatar movie comes out and in 10 days generates $300 million in 10 days worldwide. World of Warcraft comes out with a new game and in 4 days generates $500 million.
That's insane.
It's insane. Blizzard has now gone public. They're cranking these things. World of Warcraft's got 70 levels. This is old numbers, but at the last count, there was 6 million people paying $9 a month to play World of Warcraft. That's $56 million a month coming into the game.
It's amazing. So that's a huge field then.
It's a huge field, and it's going to continue to expand. The interactivity thing, and then as you can see, you know, even cable TV has given way now to internet streaming television. You know, I find myself more on YouTube than I do watching stuff because it's random access. I mean, this internet interactive stuff, and with these FiOS things coming on, the fiber optics that you could get onto, these are hot lines. This is the same stuff the government's got, and you're going to have it in your house. So, you know, you could broadcast from your house. You could have your own television station in your garage. It's just what do you put on the camera now. As an example, to set up a 24-track analog studio with a real console and all the mics and all this other stuff was probably a $150,000 to $300,000 thing to do. You could do that now with a laptop and a good interface and a mic and some zero foam. The end product will be 95 to 99% the same as the product I get. So now it's really your creativity. It's your ideas. What do you make? I mean, look even the Academy Awards, all right? The best picture goes to this one, The Hurt Locker, small indie film. And it's pitted up against a $500 million movie, The Avatar. And which wins? The little guy. It was his ideas, right? Avatar got awards for special effects and 3D and all this other cool stuff. It got acknowledged, but they got topped by something that didn't cost as much. So the opportunity for creativity is all back. I was there, literally. This is an I was there story. Watching it go from sprockets to SMPTE to hard disk recording to what is in front of everybody today as all those concepts rolled into a piece of software. And two comments. One, there's a lot to be learned by struggling. And number two, along the way, some stuff has been lost. There's some things that are not in what you got set today that we had then.
What? What things are missing?
The subtle variabilities of it being clunky. As example, an analog synth. You take a Prophet 5 right now, and you set it up, and that was already a programmable synth, so that was already crystallizing your settings. But let's go back to an ARP 2500. One of the big changes for me was I arrived with a programmable synth. Before that, they were used to guys that had just analog synths. Their frustration with those guys was, on a 2500, you patch it up and you dial it. As soon as you tear that down, that sound is gone. And getting back to that sound again was very difficult. So it was very squirrely. So that was one of the big things. So that was, the programmability was one of the first things I brought to the, at least to the film business, and I'd done it with the record business already. And they loved it, that I could go back to sound 29, it would be the same sound every time. So repeatability. Secondly, they are analog synths, and we didn't have the kind of sync that we have now. So you had to set your own echo repeats, and you had to set your own LFOs. And there was stuff that moved that in a piece of software synth has already been locked into where you want to be. And so some of the subtle variability is gone. The machine was doing things to you. Now you're really focused. Now I understand there's some new software synths and stuff like that that are building digital versions of analog machines with literally separate oscillator modules and separate filter modules, and all the variabilities are put back in. But that was all the subtlety. But think about this. If you were to make something that was what we call an A-list movie, you wanted to do the best you could every time you went there. And so that kept driving new technology, new sounds, new things like that. Now, you open up one of these things, you start at the A level. Where do you go from there? How does my soundtrack better than your soundtrack? It's got to be what's in my head. So it really falls all back on the artist.
So it's not the tools, it's the hands using the tools.
It's the hands using the tools and the concepts behind it. I want to make it do this. Well, it was never designed to do that. Well, I don't care. I want to do this, and I'm going to figure out a way. That was those days. Now, I've already beat up that manufacturer and worked with that software guy, and you've done your thing, and they've had all this input, and now it's just another preset going down. Ric's gunshots, boop, they're there. But everything you did to create the first model, back to models, the one that says, make it like this, that's in the can now. It's all clip art. Cool, but not as unique.
How would you define sound design? What is sound design to you?
Well, sound design originally was making sounds that you couldn't record with a microphone, to me. You know, make the sound of an Enterprise, make the sound of the transporter, make things for optical effects. But then they kept asking for organic effects, and then this whole idea of real sounds came in. So now this merging of real sounds, which is now just samples, and any synthesizer processing, digital thing, phaser, whatever. To me, that's sound design. But the essence of a good sound design is like a layer cake. It's taking several sounds and putting them simultaneously, you know, in sync, doing a perfect mix so that you no longer do hear what it's made it out of, it becomes a new sound. That's the essence for me. And then there's the sort of the big meta view, which is sound design in where you conceptualize what this movie sounds like. Like one of the movies I did was Army of Darkness. All right, so there was a real sound design, which I worked very closely with Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell on, to design a family of sounds that represent this movie and make this movie sound different than other movies. So it's either little, making sounds, or big, being like the interior decorator, only now the sound designer. And it was funny, there was for a long time that other version, the big version, was in conflict with what we call the sound supervisor or the supervising sound editor. So to call yourself a sound designer was like taboo, because that meant you were taking the seat of the sound supervisor. Well, now it's all kind of merged. The Gary Rydströms and the Chris Boyds, you're everything. You're the sound supervisor, you're the sound designer, you're just an everything guy. So that's all been sanitized. But there was a time when the sound designer was fighting for turf.
What do you do when you get the sound equivalent of writer's block? You can't come up with an idea. How do you overcome that?
So many times, even in the scores, I've done great themes by just screwing around. It's not an intellectual thing. I just sit down, I put a pen up, and I go, and I make sure it's recording, of course, because this is all stream of consciousness stuff. And then you play it back and you start editing. And out of that little jam, it's in there. That's where you start. Then you build on that. So you know, you've got 5,000 watts. One time I got feedback on this system.
You woke up 3 days later.
No, I now know what a sonic weapon is. I was paralyzed.
Holy
I
smokes.
was like,